Croeso, Difda, Bernachtin, Gia Hwitch, Fulcher, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your humble host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. That's Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, Isle of Man, Scotland and Ireland. Welcome. Hiya everyone, let's talk about goblins. Baby, let's talk about you and me. I know you're out there, my little goblin listeners, and I am certainly a little goblin creature myself. I mean that with love. I'm sorry if anyone actually feels offended by being called a goblin. Right, so I am currently 1 episode ahead of myself at the moment. So I've currently got 1 episode in the banks, and as soon as I finish recording this one, I'm going to upload my previous episode and hopefully keep doing that. I don't know why I didn't do that before, and I don't know how long it will last. But you're at least going to have 3 episodes on the trot. Let's hope you'll have more. I'd love to get to my 50th episode by the end of the year. That would be lush. If I can get to 50 episodes in 2025, I would be very happy with that indeed. I hope that you're all well out there, my lovely listeners. We're hopefully going to have some interesting discussions today, back to some that I've touched on before. And because I've been doing this podcast now, on and off, since December 2017, that's quite a long time. That's 8 years, isn't it? Yeah, that's 8 years coming up. So we've covered some things a few times, but I don't think it hurts to revisit, does it? So we are back to Asturian mythology, and I realised... So I've decided to add a bit of Galician and Asturian mythology to the podcast when I can, because although Asturias and Galicia they don't have Celtic languages, so by most definitions of a Celtic nation, they fall short in that regard. They have very fascinating active cultures today that are very linked with a Celtic identity, and I find that really fascinating. Celtic is itself a very tricky, messy umbrella term. It can be described to explain so many different things. So it sometimes is more of a hindrance than a help. So what do I mean when I say Galicia, Galician, Asturias, Asturian? I am talking about the 2 autonomous communities in northwest Spain, Galicia and Asturias. And both of these regions, although, as I said, they do not have Celtic languages, they do maintain a very strong Celtic identity. And there are lots of festivals, lots of, from what I can see, music, dance that is very similar to the modern Celtic nations today. So there will certainly be people out there that will disagree with me including them in this podcast. But really, as I said, Celtic can be messy. And I'm not ever ascribing culture and DNA or anything like that. I have never been interested in that. I know that's other people's sort of interest and how they feel connected to culture. To me, DNA means nothing to do with culture. That's my stance. That's how I feel about it. Culture is lived. It's how you live your life. It's an ever-changing, adapting, evolving thing. I think it's an organic, living thing, culture. It encapsulates song, dance, food, the jokes you tell, your knowledge, family knowledge passed down. It encapsulates all of these things. So if we have 2 regions that have lots of folk tales, that have lots of similarities with the 6 established Celtic nations today, if we have these 2 regions that have a strong Celtic identity in terms of the music they play, in terms of the festivals they have, then I don't really see how there should be an issue with me including them in this podcast. As I said, I know that there will be some people out there a little bit frustrated with me in that regard, but although I did my master's degree in Celtic studies, I'm not doing this podcast as an academic. I'm doing this podcast as someone that really, really loves myths and legends and wants to share them with as many people as possible. I have a really deep love of folklore and the lessons that we can learn from folklore, and also the enjoyment we can get from it as well. I think that it's a really underrated tool to understand people and also to bring people together. I'm not interested in sort of insular ways of thinking, which is quite funny when I'm talking about the insular Celtic regions. But I'm very interested in drawing parallels, drawing similarities, and hopefully speaking to and sharing these stories with people around the world, just as I love to hear stories and folk tales and mythology from other people around the world. So whilst we're here, I also thought it would be quite interesting to talk a little bit more about the kind of wider elements of Asturian and Galician culture as well. So maybe we'll talk about goblins. Maybe we'll save that for next time. We'll see. We'll see how this pans out. But one cool thing that I appreciated was the gaita asturiana. It's a type of bagpipe, and it's actually a bagpipe that is native to Asturias and to Cantabria in northern Spain. So I thought that was lovely. Again, a very, tracing a similarity between instruments and music associated with Celtic identity and Celticity, however you describe those things. There is also the Galician gaita, and that is a traditional instrument and bagpipe in Galicia and northern Portugal. There are slight differences in the shape and the size of these instruments, but they're all reed instruments, they're all kind of bagpipes. But because of the different makeup of them, they do produce different sounds and reach different octaves. So I thought that was pretty nice. That was pretty cool. So apparently the first evidence for the gaita asturiana dates back to the 13th century, which I thought was very interesting. And this is how I love sort of like folk culture and archaeology often go hand in hand. And we can attribute it to the 13th century because of a piper, because of someone looking like they're playing this particular instrument that is carved into the side of the church at Santa Maria di Villavicosia. I'm so sorry for the pronunciation. That was so bad. I would love it, by the way, if any Asturians or Galicians got in contact with me who could lend me a hand when it comes to pronunciations. That would be so appreciated, because I don't want to be sharing things and getting things horribly wrong. So please know that, listeners, if I'm covering some subjects that I really I am totally new to, I'm not an expert in, I am new to it, I'm just an amateur folklorist. I just have interest, I just have passion, and I'm trying my best. So please don't see me as an authority figure on pretty much most of the things I cover on this podcast, really. Where I have a little bit more expertise in a subject, I'm not usually shy about mentioning that or talking about it. But a lot of this is just coming from a place of love and appreciation and admiration. Secondary evidence is also of a medieval illumination of a rabbit playing the gaita in a 14th century text. I love them. I love medieval illuminations. Just having animals playing all sorts of instruments, just having a great time. Love the way they draw cats. Love the way they draw all of the animals. So I can imagine that rabbit playing the gaita is just having a great time, having an absolute ball of a time. And also, there is an early carving of a boar playing the pipes seen on the Cathedral of Oviedo. Do you know what? I actually think we might talk about goblins next time, because sometimes on this podcast, I want to talk about other elements of folk culture. I want to talk about art. I want to talk about music and dance. I want to talk about feast days and food. And I just think maybe it might be fun to focus this on the instruments of Asturias, and particularly this bagpipe, which I'm now fascinated with, and I need to go and find that rabbit playing it. So, as I mentioned, it is quite similar to the Galician sort of equivalent, if you will. They both have two pipes. They've only got the two pipes, the chanter and the drone. And that is, like I said, that's the same with the gaita and Galicia. So the traditional tuning of the chanter pipe is in C5, which is an octave above the piano's middle C. Anyone listening to this will know that I have no grounding in music theory or any sort of training in music whatsoever. I love singing shanties in the pub. I can belt out a tune or two, but I actually have no understanding of octaves or C's and D. I don't know what any of it means. So I really am kind of like reading and parroting some of this information because I think it's really interesting, and I'm hoping that there will be people out there who are taking in some of this and do understand it a little bit better than me. So apparently the C of the gaita, the C of the chanter, is between a concert C and a brilliant C, or a C brilliant. There are some differences as well, as far as I can find out. You know, some of them have been tuned to D, but apparently that is quite rare. And the more frequent is being tuned to B. And this is when the instrument is being used alongside male tonada singers. So when you've got that all of accompanying each other, you want all of the music and the voices to kind of work in tandem, I suppose. So whatever context you're playing the instrument in, I guess that has some bearing on where you're going to start it with. And apparently the drone is always 2 octaves lower than the chanter. But there are some modern makers of the gaita who will instead use it 1 octave below the chanter. And that is apparently more common, again, in Galicia. This was talking about it in like historical terms, what it would have traditionally and historically been tuned as. But I mean, today, people are pretty creative and pretty diverse with how they play instruments. I mean, I just came across, this is totally a tangent, but I just came across this Japanese group, Open Reel Ensemble, playing like old tape machines. Like, you have to look it up. It's absolutely incredible. Open Reel Ensemble. I was like in awe. It sounded like something that Gary Newman would make. So people are pretty creative with their instruments. That's just to say that now the gaita today is tuned in, you know, lots of different ways. It isn't just adhering to the traditional C. So just like with difference in tuning, it also has had keys introduced. It's had lots of different elements introduced to it today, but there are still people playing this instrument, playing this music today. And it's actually, music is such a strong component with cultural identities. And as I said, I want to be talking more about music and song and dance and feast days and food and all of that kind of things, because all of these make up culture, and culture is continuously changing and evolving and adapting. And I just think that's such a wonderful thing. So I think it's great that there's still people playing this instrument. And I'm just coming back to that rabbit. I'm just coming back to that medieval illumination of the rabbit playing it. Like, imagine that. Imagine just like these figures carved in the sides of churches and medieval manuscripts with a little rabbit playing this instrument. And now people today are altering it and changing it and adapting it and still playing the same thing. Like, I just think that's so cool. Sometimes like these are like sort of, culture is never unbroken, like it's never stagnant, you know, it never remains the same, and it shouldn't. You shouldn't have any element that is unchanging, right? It should always be changing. It should always be finding new ways to evolve and have a different second, third, fourth, fifth, 12th life. So I've just fallen down a little bit of a rabbit hole, looking at notable people that have played this instrument, one of which was known as Gaitero Libardon. But a lot of these sources are in Spanish, and like I'm trying to translate them to English so I can like vaguely understand what's going on. But yeah, just because I'm just getting stuck in rabbit holes now. But Ramon Garcia Tuero, better known as the Piper Libardon, he was born in the sort of middle of the 19th century and was a very well-known Asturian piper and very kind of, it seems, very instrumental in increasing like awareness and enjoyment and cultural significance of this instrument. And apparently at one point was there was a request from King Alfonso XIII, who wanted the best piper of Asturias to be the official piper in the palace, and he was one of 2 pipers that was considered for the job. So pretty high praise there. But that's kind of interesting as well, isn't it? It's like this idea of even in this sort of 19th century, kings are requesting to have entertainers and pipers play in their palaces and courts. Just sounds great. I've always thought like being a medieval jester sounds like a decent gig. I'll go back and do that. Also, I love the bells. I just love their hats with the bells. I reckon I could pull that off in my everyday life, actually, a sort of pseudo-jester outfit. I might give it a go. So it seems that Ramon was born into a farming family, but did show very early on some considerable talents for music. And seems he attended various events internationally playing music and won awards. And it seems that sort of towards the end of the 19th century, he was no longer being, called Ramon. He was then being known as Libardon. And apparently that is a very Asturian thing to do, is to name someone after the place where they live or the place where they're from, as a sort of term of respect or perhaps acknowledging like his significance and importance. But yeah, this is when he started to be known as Gaitero Libardon. And I guess that's a way of really signalling excellence, isn't it? If you are associated with, like, say, for example, I was just like a violin player. Or, no, a shanty singer. Let's call me a shanty singer. And I was called Shanty Singer St. Austell. That's like the shanty singer of St. Austell. So pretty cool that he was that excellent, that he was associated with being sort of the Gaiteru player. Apparently he was really also upholding the Asturian cider industry. Apparently he was going to like loads of festivals and stuff and playing, associating with that. But he was also incredibly significant in actually recording these instruments, and is perhaps the first recorded player in terms of like actually having an audio recording of him playing the gaiter. Let's just play a little bit of that recording here if we can. That is from Chus Solis on YouTube, has uploaded that clip from Ramon Garcia Tuero, the El Gaiteru Libardon, playing a little bit of the pipe there, it seems. So it seems that at a time when this type of music wasn't really that well known, and probably still isn't, he was attending a ton of international and national festivals and bringing more awareness to Asturian culture and to this instrument, which I just thought he deserved a bit of a shout out because I thought that was pretty cool. A great modern example of the gaiter today would be the band La Reina del Trebano, which apparently in English is the Queen of the Hive. They are an Asturian gaitas band formed in the middle of the 90s, and they still play today as far as I'm aware, and tour around and go to lots of international festivals and music festivals in Ireland, United States, what have you. So I think that's pretty cool. It's like a long line of musical tradition there. So I'm sorry we didn't cover a beastie or a ghoulie or anything today in this episode, but I thoroughly enjoyed researching this, and I began with a very different thing that I wanted to talk about in mind, but I'll leave that until the next Asturian episode. But just delving into, I felt like I needed to give a bit more of a context for, Asturian and Galician mentions on this podcast. And then looking into that, I just got totally into a rabbit hole about music. So I really enjoyed this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it too. And I do want to expand a bit more, and I do want to incorporate more music, dance, feast days, festivals, different things other than purely just here's a spooky myth and legend, because I think all of these things are culturally important, and all of these make up, folk culture. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you ever so much for listening as ever. And I'm going to go and upload my next episode now. So you'll now be hearing this and hopefully thinking back about that amazing Galician episode you just heard. Thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your week, month, whatever. See you next time. I am your host, Sian Esther Powell, and that has been another episode of the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. If you would like to find it elsewhere on the interwebs, you can also find me on Twitter at Celtic Myths Pod, on Facebook under Celtic Myths and Legends Podcast, on Patreon at Celtic Myths Pod, as well as Instagram at Celtic_Sian, and also CelticSian.co.uk. Thank you, Muraz, Diolch, Tachpalet, Guramahagat, Trugare, Guramayed. Thank you, and speak to you next time. Thank you.